And we thought of just giving people another minute or so because we know that classes might end only at 1 and then just to give people a chance. So please be patient. We'll be with you in a few minutes. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon again, colleagues. Can you give me an indication whether you can hear me? Please.
Hi, Nicoline. Margriet here. We can hear you, but you're quite
some thumbs up. Thank you so much. Colleagues, so from my side, welcome here. I am Nicoline Herman from the Centre for Teaching and Learning, and it's my honor to be your host today and to welcome you to this first quarterly Teaching Learning Assessment Seminar of 2025, offered by the Division of Teaching Learning Enhancement. And as I said, we have around 4 of these a year, and the purpose is to also promote the scholarship of teaching and learning, but also to sort of challenge our thinking and really take teaching learning assessment forward at Stellenbosch University. So we roughly have an hour to our availability, and during this time I will introduce the topic, the presenter to you, and then the presentation will be around about 30 minutes to try and give ample time for questions and answers, and then we will end the session there. And during the time, the feedback forms will also be posted in the chat. So if you can then also provide feedback for us, it will be very much valued. All right, so then as you've seen, and that's obviously why you then enrolled today, is for the topic. So rethinking the decolonial moment towards an ethics of hospitality in higher education. And as you've seen from the invitation, Prof. Lis Lange is our speaker, and I'm going to read to you her bio. So Prof. Lange is a special advisor to the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Learning and Teaching at Stellenbosch University, and also the Acting Senior Director of the DLTE. Before that, she was UCT's Deputy Vice-Chancellor, and between 2014 and 2018, she held a similar portfolio at Free State University. She was also the Executive Director of the Higher Education Quality Committee of the CHE, a lot of acronyms there. And she's been involved in the development and implementation of science and technology and higher education policy in South Africa since 1998. Wow, Liz, many, many years of experience there. Prof. Lange's research interests are focused on the philosophy and politics of higher education, and she has done research and published on change in higher education as well as on the meanings and possibilities of the notion of transformation, decolonization, and curriculum change, and on the meaning of the university in the 21st century. So bringing all of that together today for our presentation, where Lis will then revisit the decolonial moment in South African universities to identify missed opportunities for addressing students' sense of exclusion and lack of recognition, as well as the potential for decolonizing the university. She will also examine how the COVID-19 pandemic temporarily opened space for recognizing students' psychosocial and economic realities and use this to offer insights into new relationships between students, the university, and society. Drawing on Derrida, Mignolo, and Anzaldúa, Prof. Lange proposes an ethics of hospitality as a response to the unresolved questions of #roads must fall and #fees must fall, envisioning a refoundation of the university in the 21st century. So thank you, Lis. We're really looking forward to your presentation, and I now hand over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My paper sounds even intimidating to me, actually. Let me try and share my screen. This kind of paper is ridiculously difficult to. Please let me. Can you see my presentation? Okay. This type of paper is very difficult to put in a presentation that it is vaguely coherent. I was telling Nicolene that I should have thought better about presenting this paper. It is a bit of a cheat because the paper has just been published. So it's not new work, but it's something I've been thinking quite carefully for a while. The actual title of the paper is Thinking the University in the Aftermath of the Decolonial Turn. And I want to, first of all, declare where I come from in talking about this. I mean, in a sense, it's useful that Nicolene read a little bit of my CV. I have been involved in higher education management for several years. And I certainly experienced fees must fall at the University of the Free State from beginning to end. And I arrived at the University of Cape Town at the time in which the university was dealing with its own aftermath. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission at the university and these type of conversations. So when one is in management, one is sometimes in a conflicted position in terms of what one thinks about things and in terms of what has to be done, and one sort of proceeds with speed, and reflection is not always there. So in a sense, I'm coming full circle in my own experience about these issues and in my own way of looking about this and writing about the university. And that's the reason why I wrote this paper. This partially my own sort of self-reflection. So as you can see, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the argument that Nicolene enunciated already. I'm going to talk about misrecognition and exclusion and how we understand that. I'm going to talk about borders and hospitality, and I'm going to talk about something that sounds a little bit like a dream, but it actually happened. As Nicolene mentioned, I mean, what the paper is arguing is that we need to actually look back at what happened between 2015 and 2017 in all our higher education system, because I think that we missed opportunities to deal with the sense that the students had of exclusion and lack of recognition on the part of universities. And I just want to clarify from the very beginning that when I'm talking about exclusion and lack of recognition, is a broad sense of talking about exclusion and lack of recognition, and I'm going to explain the different layers that has. I think that the failure that we had as a system, and each university is a particular case of this, of addressing the critique that Fees Must Fall had of the university, has to be understood in a concept in a more theoretical concept, in a more theoretical way. And I think that what we need to do is to try and ask us questions about what actually means to be talking even about a decolonial university. And then I want us to talk a little bit about what happened during COVID and whether there is something that we can learn from that. So let me get on with it. One of the important, there are a whole lot. Let me start differently. There are a lot of studies about exclusion and misrecognition. And the notion of misrecognition, as maybe some of you who are in the field of philosophy and political sciences will know, is a concept that sort of has been there for a long time, particularly misrecognition. And when I use it and when other people use it, we are talking about an interplay between what it is individual, emotional, psychological, and as in terms of the personal experience of inequality, and what it is collective, structural, and socioeconomic in terms of what it is that one deals with collectively as part of our existence. So from that point of view, there is no a dividing line between what an individual experiences, and a student will experience individually at the university, and the anger of the student as part of a social movement, that it is not seeing the reality of his or their existence in society, and in that case, in what is manifested at your university. So there are, leave that one. Let's stay there for a moment. There have been at all of our institutions different moments in which this misrecognition came up. And it comes in very complicated and different ways. So what were the students asking? The students were saying, look at me, I am here. And the look at me, I am here had a number of manifestations. It had a socioeconomic manifestations in the sense that there were those students who could not afford the university. It was a psychological and cultural manifestation in terms of students who came from a completely different context and were forced by the organization of the university to function in a language that was not theirs, to deal with rights, with systems, with processes that existed there and to which they have to adapt, and with modes of presentation and dealing with things that were molded in a history of institutions that long preceded their presence in the institution. What it is interesting for me of what happened, and I think that this happened at many institutions, but I'm going to use the example of UCT, is that one could identify different moments in which a problem arises, the university solves it in a particular way, and that particular way of dealing with the problem actually fails to see what actually the students are saying. So let me give you two examples and see whether we can understand what this is. The one is very well known, and it is the moment in which the students are asking for the removal of the statue of Cecil Rhodes at UCT, and they see in the monument the sort of concretization of the imperial idea and the sense of white colonialism. So what happened at UCT is that the Senate meets, discusses this, the Senate accepts the notion that Rhodes must fall, and together with Council, the idea is accepted. Okay, so there comes the university and says, okay, we are taking Rhodes down. And that moment is a moment of performativity in which the students manage to get Rhodes down. But the university enters into the conversation not from the point of view of understanding what colonialism means for its own existence, but enters into it very pleased with its own liberal approach and unwillingness to change things without actually examining the deeper roots of this. This is one example of a missed opportunity. The second missed opportunity happened in a more complex way. In 2016, there was an exhibition commemorating the year of Rhodes Must Fall at UCT. And the exhibition was disrupted by the trans collective at UCT that was demonstrating against the exclusion of gender diverse people during in the protest, in the whole social movement. And what this thing do? This thing brought in the cracks of different forms of intersectionality in the culture of the university that came to the surface as other ways of existence. So sexuality, gender divergence, etc., came up in that situation. What does the university do in the front before this? What the university does is to create unisex bathrooms, allow students to use whatever pronoun they choose to designate themselves, and basically declare that we are all equal. What the university does not do is to reflect on itself as a heteronomic patriarchal institution, and how does this translate into the manner in which the university functions, the university is, and the university behaves. So what I'm arguing is that the university usually chooses administrative and managerial responses to issues that come from a different corner. Okay, so in a sense, we talk about white privilege as the main issue that the students sort of demonstrated against during this period. And by white privilege, I'm not only meaning what is the obvious, but I'm also talking about how students saw the failure of the democratic government in delivering social justice that had been promised. So the notion of white privilege is simultaneously historical, is sociological, is political, and it is psychological, and is an emotion that it is fed by materiality and by these different layers. So at the university also, in terms in which the universities function, the white privilege means that there is a distance between the reality of the university, the reality of the life of the students, and the reality of the communities around the university, and how the university itself exists in society. So that was in a sense, the opportunity that we missed overall at Fees Must Fall, addressing that kind of issue. So I have been thinking about these issues for quite a while, and one of the things that I've had argued is that the pressure of the Fees Must Fall movement pushed the university into a space of self-doubt, into a corner in which the university was supposed to be asking itself, what is it that I am? And in that sense, the university suffered what I have called elsewhere a crisis of authority. This put the university in what I call a border. So it's pushed out of the center of itself, if you want, and the university exists now in a border in which the differences, the inequalities, the concerns about culture become more explicit. So from a decolonial point of view, the notion of the border is a notion that brings together periphery and center. So it's not something that it is either or, but and with. So the possibility of critique in the border is simultaneously global and local, and implies a double engagement, if you want, with both. So what I find particularly interesting and important about the notion of the border is that border also associates with the notion of frontier, so a limit between two things, and also with the notion of a refugee. So if you think in terms of borders, you think about what's happening in migration, the movement of people across borders, and the notion that you enter into a space that it is not your space, but you want as yours. And therefore you are in a space in which you are, in a sense, foreign. And yet, the concept of border in the context of decoloniality assumes that that border, that state of being a refugee, in a sense, is not a multilingual space in which I who speak my language sort of lives together with you who speak another language. The richness of the border thinking is that it becomes translanguage in space, in which we all speak our languages and we respect our languages. So, in a sense, being in the border helps the university to think what is the process of identity formation. How do we become to be who we are as individuals, but also as institutions? Now, my argument is that being able to think about identity formation is not enough. It's not enough to constitute the university again in a different way. What we need to do is to interrogate ourselves about the meaning of hospitality. So, what is hospitality? Hospitality, in its sort of Latin understanding, means to give refuge, to give shelter. And what does is to demand a way of being in relation to ourselves and to the others. So it's a sense of being able to recognize in a relation to equals. And that's the reason why Derrida says that ethics is hospitality, and that therefore hospitality needs to become a culture in which we basically swim in order to be enacted. So my question, using this notion, is this that it is written here. What needs to be done for the space of the university to become a hospitable space for all of us? Not a space in which we tolerate the life with each other, but the place in which we forge different relationships between the university inhabitants, all of us, and between the university and the world in which the university exists, and in which the university does its job, which is to learn, to teach, and to produce knowledge. So how do we do this? So I think that in order to do this, we need to do a few things. First thing is that we need to, as I suggested about the border, to redefine our relationship between what's local and particular and what is global and universal. This is the biggest dilemma of modernity. We need to do this also in relation to the things that are our tools, in relation to knowledge, in relation to culture, in relation to language, in relation to emotion in the physical space. So in that way, basically what I'm suggesting is that the university needs to almost reinscribe itself in a notion of creolization, as if it was a kind of mestizo space. And then the next step, the university in relation to the big picture, the university as institution in terms of what it does, and the next step is the university in relation to the outside. So from a university that is closed off to its own hinterland, to a university that accepts as a duty of reparation the participation of the community in which exists as part of the orientation of the work that we do at the university. So when I was doing all of this work and grappling with the theoretical sort of concepts that inform this paper, somebody asked me, all of this is well and fine, but I mean, have you ever seen this? Or are you having just a dream that it is impossible to realize? And I thought that actually, yes, I have seen this briefly, and I want to reflect with you as to how I saw it and what had happened, because I think that you might have had a similar experience here at Stellenbosch. So not soon Rose Must Fall and all of those things were over, and we were getting into some sense of normality, that we have the COVID pandemic. And many things happened during the COVID pandemic that are important, but in terms of the university, I think that there was something that changed everything. And it was that we have to close down. So try and think about the university, in a sense, ceasing to exist in its materiality. So suddenly, the timetable and the space of the university, the residences, the classrooms, do not exist anymore. When the timetable exists, when the residences are open, when the space of the university is open, that space and that time erase the social differences between ourselves and our students, between the students themselves, and amongst us and our colleagues. So the materiality, the sociological differences between us get moderated by the existence of the university as a kind of neutral space, in a sense. Now, in that stage, the inequality is not as brutal. The moment in which you close the university, the brutal materiality and inequality that exists in the life of our students and between our students reinstates itself. because then we all are conscious of where you are positioned, how are you positioned, is what fundamentally will determine who can cope with COVID and who cannot. And at that moment, we all understood that we needed to provide hospitality to each other in order to get through the pandemic. And the primary focus of that hospitality were our students. We understood that we were refugee together in a world that had been taken by a virus. And we made a conscious effort to oblige to our duty of hospitality. I must say that, I mean, this lasted for a short period, but I never seen an awareness of white privilege work so much and so well in dealing with structural inequality, in recognizing difference, in recognizing problems and trying to manage them. So I give you a couple of examples. There were things that everybody did at all universities, and from distributing computers to doing to sending stuff to the students, etc. At UCT, the people who ran the Baxter Theater contacted me to say that they wanted to participate in the effort of supporting the students. So they volunteered to organize the system of printing, dispatching, couriering, and retrieving materials for students who were not able to access online education. And they became the sort of way of the node of a communication network with those students, filter with all the faculties and everybody working in that regard. Staff were conscious on where the students were, who the students were, and it was a sense of togetherness at that level that we didn't have again since. So I think that there are examples at all of our institutions of practices and ways of being hospitable that can help us to develop this notion of border thinking and can give us some guidance in order to think of refounding the university as part of a decolonial moment. I think that together we can try to answer the questions that we were not able to answer or that we were too scared to confront during COVID-19. And I think that those questions include how we debureaucratize the university, how we humanize our administrative processes, how we deal with knowledge in a more inclusive, no, inclusive is the wrong way, in a decentered kind of way. So that's my story. I hope that I could make sense of some of it at least, and I will be happy to answer any questions or comments. Thank you.
Your microphone is off, Nicoline.
Thank you so much, Liz. I think you saw the hearts and the hands for bringing us into your paper, your theoretical paper that you just published. So congratulations on publishing it, and thank you for sharing with us. So colleagues, I saw there was a question in the chat from Jean, which she then said was answered. So anybody else, any comments, any questions? Jean, I see there you are. I'm going to switch my mic.
Thank you, Nicoline. Yes, I do have another question, Liz. Amazing. I love. You can't hear me?
I can hear you, Jean.
Jean, sorry, we can't hear you.
Okay, Margriet can hear me.
We can hear you well, Jean. Yeah.
Accent great. Margriet said she could hear her.
Yes, sorry. No.
Can Liz hear me?
Okay, there you are now. You're back.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Liz. I really enjoyed listening to that. So my first question was about the experience of the marginalized, but then you spoke immediately about how the university should be thinking about people who might feel marginalized and how they would get into that. But my further question is then who makes up the university? Because if it is all of us who are already there, then does hospitality not presuppose a full sense of belonging of the people who are opening their doors? Because I don't always feel that the people who are there, the staff and the students who are in this space, who kind of should be feeling that the space is their home, because that's what hospitality is. You invite others into your home. Does the idea of hospitality not then presuppose that everyone who's already there has a full sense of belonging and inclusion?
Thank you. It's a very good question. I think that in a sense, remember that the hospitality that I'm talking about is a hospitality that operates in a border. So there is no more center in the manner in which I'm talking. So the hospitality takes as a point of departure the recognition of each other. So in a sense, the home, as the institutional home, sort of needs to let the walls fall down. And then in that sense, we are all part of a whole. And that's the difficult part. That was exactly why it was so difficult, because we accepted, we have a notion of hospitality, which is not quite hospitality. We said, you're welcome to my home as far as you don't leave the towel on the floor and you have tea at the time at which I do. Not that I'm suggesting that people should leave the towel on the floor, but that's the story. So there are no rules that are imposed. It's a dialogue in which we come together. That's the reason why I'm saying this is not about a multilingual space, but a translanguaging space. Thank you, Jean. Yeah, I can see the questions, Gerda. Look, there are many walls that need to be let down. From the experience of my previous employers and a little bit here, I would say that one of the walls that need to be let down is the notion of an us and them. The notion that the community is a place where you go, or something that you do too, and it has to have a different type of relationship in which the university needs to recognize what is owed to the space and what the actions can be. I mean, I'm not going to talk about Stellenbosch, but I mean, I can talk about Mannenberg. How can it be that UCT is not fully involved in Mannenberg with the people in Mannenberg to create a different space, to create a project of development that involves the university and the people together? So in a sense, the university needs to open its doors and its sense of hospitality to involve all of us. So that's one of the walls. The second wall that needs to fall back is the sense that we have a type of knowledge that it is universal, and we are being nice in understanding or giving a little space for something that it is particular or local. We need to change that conceptualization that we are at the center of a universe that functions around us. And then how do we construct knowledge in this regard? So anyway, that's in relation to that. Sorry, I'm very bad at reading things. I'm curious about the power dynamics in between. But again, that's exactly the point, is that we are all refugees together. So I understand the notion to who's the host and who is hosted. But host and hosted are a different notion from this as a culture for everybody, in which we are all equivalent. And in a sense, as they said in Spanish, in Mexico in particular, mi casa is su casa, which is my house, is your house. So that's the idea that I'm trying to. I think that Oleg has a question, and Hanel, who's that? Claudia has a question. Claudia, you look first.
Hi, everybody. This is Debbie on Claudia's computer. Debbie
Oh, okay.
Blaine.
Hi, Debbie.
Yes. So I'm thinking of this idea of hospitality, and I'm thinking of when in one of the classes that I was teaching, I put this idea of hospitality in terms of a wedding and a wedding celebration. It was a class in which we were talking about intercultural competencies. And so in the class, I was asking the students, like, what in your culture, how do you celebrate the marriage of two people? And so you had everything from, it's a small affair, invitation only, you don't take offense if you're not offended, if you're not invited because people are saving money and it's expensive and so on, to you take extreme offense if the entire village and everybody is not invited. It is a celebration. You don't need to supply all the food. Everybody brings the food and it is a communal celebration. So I think this is something that's always struck me at Stellenbosch University. You have such a wide range of values and cultural perspectives, and there are different cultures that what is rude or what is hospitable in one culture is not, and is inhospitable in another. So, I mean, for me, the obvious way that you bridge this is through discussions such as this. But what are your visions for grappling with that diversity, especially in South Africa? One thing from having lived overseas, one thing that I really value in South Africa is that despite our differences, the different cultures have maintained sovereignty and pride in their culture. They don't lose it. And so that's why it's the Rainbow Nation. You know, the colors are not merging into one white light. They are keeping their distinct colors. And I think that is the beauty of the South African culture. But how do we make that brightness shine in our spaces? I'd like to know your ideas for that.
Well, I mean, the point is that, you see, the cultural aspect is always nicer and more, in a sense, romantic than the material aspect of it. Because in a sense, despite our best intentions, the Rainbow Nation produces a white light. Because things have not changed substantially in the undergird of the system. But of course, I mean, when I talk about translanguaging, you can juxtapose and you can use the metaphor of language to other levels. I mean, this is not about you coming to university and there is only one way of getting married. It's only one way of becoming an adult. All of those things allow for spaces and require that we understand these things. I mean, giving you one example, the real conversation that we had is about the first examinations taking into account the period of initiation for our students, for our male students. This is a way of understanding and supporting and realizing that something is fundamentally important. So that's one example. This is not about converting each other to a culture that doesn't distinguish identity. The formation of identity, as I indicated, is fundamentally important, but it's not enough. So we need to find the common at other levels. That's what I'm trying to suggest. Ole.
Thank you, Liz. And maybe you might have touched on what I want to say already. I just hope I will make sense to you. The notion of hospitality as I'm grappling with it sounds more like coming from a point of neutrality, and higher education and the academy in South Africa does not really come from a sort of a neutral point. And therefore, the 2015-16 Rose Must Fall, Fees Must Fall were more about the epistemological and ontological makeup of students. The students were calling for a decolonized education and curriculum, specifically because they felt that their knowledges and their being are not being recognized by the university. And beyond that, right now, I'm sure you'd also have seen some of the responses from an ethic of care, and now you are proposing as well an ethic of hospitality. The response has been more axiological, and I just worry that what makes the proposals from an axiological perspective viable against the neoliberal university, where there is still us and them, and the powerful being able to resist the changes and transformation and decolonization using their superiority, whatever the case might be. What makes axiological, this ethics of care, ethics of hospitality viable against the neoliberal university? Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great question. I think that what makes the difference, Ole, is that this is not a defense or a proposition about the value of hospitality in an abstract way. This is a recognition of the value of hospitality in a particular location, which is the fundamental critique and decentering of the authority of the university as the traditional Western university, and including with that, the neoliberal university and its bureaucratization and administrative processes, etc. But the university in the border is a university that is questioned epistemologically, organizationally, and materially in terms of what it means, certainly in the sort of in the colonial world, if you want to. It is how the very materiality of the university is based on an equal relationship. So when the sort of ethical moment comes, is a moment that actually is not just in terms of ethics, it's in terms of constitution, a culture that has a materiality in which the recognition of each other is what allows us to work and to do what we have to do. So it's not sort of kiss and make up and take care of each other and resume the liberal university, but it's try and reconstruct the university from a point of complete, if you want, disequilibrium of what the university was before. How you build Hansi, look, I think that as these things happen, the bureaucratic and administrative drive of the neoliberal university takes us back all the time. And I think that we need to come back, frankly. with the things that were possible then and reinstated now. There are a number of things that we can do. And I mean, it is actually ridiculous that in some cases we manage to include more or to see better. To see better, I think it is the best formulation. Our students, when we were not seeing them, than when we see them. And we were better able to see each other when we were not seeing. What happened is not only affect our students, it's also affected many of our colleagues. The reality of our lives was different. So I think that again, we need to understand how we missed the boat, how we missed the opportunity, and try and trace our steps back and say, this is where we miss it. Let's try again in this direction. Of course, it's a lot of work. Of course, it is not the best way of generating sustainability, but it is a way of looking at the university differently. And quite frankly, I think it is worth the effort.
Over your mic. You said in the beginning it's more theoretical, and I think the question that I now have is, and going back, tracing our steps back to COVID might be a way of really thinking about how it should change or play out in practice. So I think that's one of the things that I'm trying to think about is what would this look like in practice? If we sort of trace back, and because also in my mind, the purposes of higher education, obviously we were in crisis, we tried what we could try, etc., but how do we bring all of this together then in practice? What will it look on a daily basis for each of us?
Okay. Look, I mean, there are many examples, and the examples depend on what part of the university you're at, and etc. But I mean, for example, there were situations which we needed to create experiential situations, experiential learning for students, and how we bring the students together and how to make them work in a particular way. So my colleagues in the Faculty of Engineering organize immersive experiences for students to come into specific virtual spaces, and then they recreated those spaces physically, and there was a selection of the tasks. The pedagogy change, the manner in which we became conscious of how we were teaching change. People stop sort of reciting the same 40, 50-minute lecture in order to understand what were the processes of learning that were taking place at that point. The administration of the university, the way of allocating spaces to students, started to take into account what the needs of the students were going to be, rather than what are the rules and how the rules are imposed. Something that changed formidably was assessment. It was a fantastic opportunity to change assessment. Some faculties, some programs decided that no, we are not going to do assessment in the traditional way. We do away with assessment in the traditional way. We find other ways of testing the learning of students, of making sure of it. So, I mean, there are a number of things that one can do. But I think that all of them start almost with a sense of humility, that what we do, what we are used to, what we are attached to, might not be the only answer, or the value answer, or the universal answer for all the problems. Anyway, thank you, everybody.
Okay. Thank you, colleagues. So I don't know whether there's any other questions, but you're welcome to follow that up with an email to either Liz or myself. And I'm sure we will follow up some of these discussions. So thank you again, Nicoline. I read thanks, Nicoline, there. Thank you again, Liz, for sharing this with us. And we're looking forward to also reading the paper. So if you can send us the citation, it will really be useful. And yeah, thank you so much. And we'll see you for the next seminar, which will be in the next term. And you'll receive the invitations. And thank you so much. Take care. All the best. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.